Hey guys, welcome to another video for anatomy and physiology. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at two things. Number one, the intervertebral disc and the vertebrae. Now with the vertebrae, I'm just going to give kind of a general view of the vertebrae and look at the components that they all have in common, because you have three types of vertebrae. You have the cervical, thoracic, and the lumbar. And there's a couple of features that they all have in common. In the next video, I'll go into the differences of each of these types. So we're looking at a vertebrae right here, and we're looking at what they all have in common. And one of the biggest things they have in common is the body of the vertebrae. This is where the intervertebral disc will sit. And then, of course, the vertebrae protects the spinal cord, which runs through the foramen right here. This is the vertebral foramen. Remember, the word foramen is essentially anywhere there's a hole where blood vessels or nerves can go through. And speaking of which, we have another one here. This is the inferior notch. Now, inferior notch, inferior meaning below. So that means there's just going to be a superior notch. So the vertebrae that goes just below this one, just inferior to this one, will have a superior notch that will make a foramen right here. And that's where the spinal nerves will come in and make a connection with the spine. So let's look at some other features here. Now I'm looking at here. This is actually a thoracic vertebrae, and this has some pretty unique features that I'm not going to look at just yet. Again, we're just looking at the things that they have in common with the other vertebrae. So another thing that they will all have in common is transverse process. Transverse processes, they extend outwardly, they extend laterally from the vertebrae. So they stick out, and all these features do have something important. They either support, it's either a supporting structure for another bone, for a ligament, or for muscles. And so the transverse process is connected to the body through what's called the pedicle. Okay, think pedicle, podiatrist, a foot. So it's kind of like the foot holding, if you will, connecting the two. And then from the transverse process, we have what's called the laminae. Okay, so it's kind of like, think laminate, like a sheet. So like laminate flooring, I don't know if you're familiar with that. Laminate flooring is just like a sheet of flooring that goes on the floor. So this is a thinner version of the pedicle. So this is kind of like the foot holding, and this is the sheet, if you will, or the flat-like feature that connects the transverse process to one of the parts of the spine of the vertebrae that you can actually see protruding from the human body, from a live organism, and that's the spinous process. Okay, all three types of vertebrae have the spinous process. Okay, now let me see if there's anything else I wanted you to look at as part of the spinous process. And you have the superior articular process. Okay, and again, this kind of snuggles into the inferior notch here of the vertebrae that will be sitting up on top. And then in between those vertebrae, we have intervertebral disc, which is what we're going to talk about next. So your intervertebral disc is the soft part. This is not bone. So you have bone, and it's sandwiched in between the vertebrae. You're going to have intervertebral disc. In fact, let's go to that real quick. So here I have the vertebrae again. Let me switch it around. Now let's zoom in a little bit. All right, so here again we have two vertebrae, two thoracic vertebrae. We have the T9 and T8, and in between each of these vertebrae you have the intervertebral disc. Now let's back up just a bit so you can see where this starts, because not every single vertebrae has an intervertebral disc. In fact, the first intervertebral disc you will find is between C2 and C3. Okay, so here's C1, here's C2, and here's C3. So let's zoom in. So between C2 and C3, the axis and the C3 vertebrae, you have the intervertebral disc right there, and that's the first one. Okay. So in between the atlas and the axis, there is no intervertebral disc. So it's between C2 and C3. And then the last one you can find located, let's zoom in here, you'll find located in between lumbar 5 and the sacrum. And that's the last intervertebral disc that you'll find. So the intervertebral disc is basically made out of two things. You have the nucleus, it's called the nucleus pulposus. That's the inner gelatinous center. And then on the outside you have outer rings called the annulus fibrosis. The annulus fibrosis is essentially a ring of fibrocartilage, so really tough cartilage. And the function of the intervertebral disc is to essentially fuse or to bind the vertebrae that are below and above it. Okay, in addition to that, it also helps in maintaining or supporting body weight and absorbing shock. Now, there are times, if you have an excessive amount of stress, compacted or torqued in some way, you can actually rupture that intervertebral disc. That's what's called a herniated disc, a ruptured disc or a slipped disc. And what can happen is that nucleus can ooze out. And as that nucleus oozes out, it can actually apply pressure to one of the spinal nerves that's coming out. Okay. In fact, let's talk about those spinal nerves real quick. Okay, so we're looking at the nervous system here. And of course, we have the brain. And I want to get closer into the spinal cord because I wanted to show you how the vertebrae, how some of these features are actually coming into play here. So we're at the thoracic region here. Let's see. So I have T4 here and T5. And what I want to do is I'm going to, let me bring it up a bit. So you can see they're kind of hidden a little bit. They're kind of shaded. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this one. This one's T5. I'm going to hide it. I'm going to remove it. Okay, so you'll notice here, I don't know if you can see, here's the intervertebral disc. Here I'm going to show this one a little bit more. Let's make it in bold. Okay, so I have T6 and T5 here, and I have T4 missing. And you'll notice that the spinal cord, I want you to take a look and see how the spinal cord actually runs into the vertebral foramen. So here's the vertebral foramen. Let me zoom in. So there's the vertebral foramen, and then you see the spinal cord running through it. So if you could imagine, so the spinal cord is like the tree trunk, right? And so out of the tree trunk, of course, is going to be your branches. Okay, so and that's called the peripheral nervous system, and that's something we highlight even more later on. And so let me highlight this vertebrae too. And the reason why I want to highlight these, okay, so let me get rid of this bone right here. It's bugging me. All right, so you'll notice that the peripheral nervous system is branching out and it's coming out. So this is the spinal cord, and then you have a root ganglion here, which is basically just a bundle of nerves that are branching out, and this could be going out into the arm or into the ribs. And you'll notice here, this is the inferior notch of T6. Okay, so that's the inferior notch, and then the superior notch of T7 is right here. So the superior notch and the inferior notch of the above vertebrae, this is what makes the intervertebral foramen. Okay, so again, that's an opening where nerves and blood tissue can go through, and of course here you have the superior notch of T7 again. So I just wanted to kind of show you how this actually works. And again, here you have, oops, you can kind of see sandwiched there the vertebrae, the intervertebral disc in between the bodies of these two vertebrae here. Okay, and I think, let me see, and you can see the spinous process and how they have that strong angle. The angle down right here, the spinous process of these vertebrae. And that's something specific to the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, well, let's see here. I think that was it. I just wanted to show you how that worked, the intervertebral foramens and the vertebral foramen here. This is a superior view. We're looking at the posterior, and this is a lateral view from the side. Okay? Okay, well, I think that does it. I think that's all the features that I wanted to show you that these vertebrae have in common. In the next videos, we're going to be highlighting the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar, and looking at the very specific features that they have and how you can differentiate one from the other. Okay, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something new, and good luck in your studying.